Hello, people of the internet, and welcome to what is probably going to be the biggest, most anticipated review for the Kaiju Noir channel in terms of recent movies, given what I normally talk about, or what I like to talk about here on this channel, and that is the review for Pacific Rim Uprising, the long-awaited sequel to 2013's Pacific Rim, which was the giant monster, giant robot love letter that Guillermo del Toro worked on as this big passion project. And here with me to review said movie is someone who has been on this channel multiple times, and of course is the only person I can rely on when it comes to giant monster madness, cinematic giant monster madness, and that is the one and only Matt Denian.
Hey everybody, as always, I love being on the show with Andres and entertaining you people, hopefully. So yeah, Andres, let's get into this one.
Right. Yeah, because this was probably a very painful experience for me. Not to I guess I'm gonna spoil my thoughts here and right now, but
go for it.
This was my most anticipated movie for 2018. Rampage, we had no idea whether or not it was going to be good, or because it's a video game movie and there's often that curse associated with it. Let's see, Ready Player One, it was kind of on my radar, but it wasn't as big of a priority for me. And then Infinity War, it's sure, this is what everything's been leading up to, but I've been kind of having this very slow burnout of Marvel movies. So
yeah,
with Pacific Rim, it's it's the second movie in the franchise. It's a movie I've been dying for ever since I saw the first movie, because the thing is, I fucking loved the first Pacific Rim movie. I consider it perhaps my 10th favorite movie of all time. I know it's not a perfect movie, but there's just so much joy, so much love, so much passion, so much charm, and it's got a lot of that that spirit as to why I love movies, why I love the genre. And for people who don't like it because it's too basic, or the designs don't work, or the characters don't work for them, that's perfectly fine. I totally understand. But for me, it just hits that sweet spot that gets that inner child in me giddy with joy. And unfortunately, this new movie has none of that. So this was easily probably the most disappointing movie-going experience for me in quite a number of years. Sorry, I know you've been wanting to say something.
No, go. Sorry. You were rolling there, hitting the nail right on the head. Yeah, I think that's kind of the issue with this movie. I mean, to put it in perspective, and for me as well, I love Pacific Rim, and you and I both, I would say, two of our most well-known characters are inspired by Pacific Rim, right? Like, did Draco Azul with the double name not
Yes,
partially
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
You also hit the nail in the head yourself, because I was very inspired by Pacific Rim, along with James Biggie and Frankie B. Washington's Robot God Akamatsu, seeing these original giant robot properties on the big screen and on the indie side, comic side, which inspired me to say, hey, I can do it. If these people can make their own giant robots, I can do that too. And I ended up creating Draco Azul, and yes, I did do the whole double name Gypsy Danger, Cherno Alpha, Striker Eureka, Crimson Typhoon, Draco Azul, which was also a thing that I also carried. I was also inspired by Metal Gear Solid, because a lot of the characters would also have code names like Sniper Wolf or Revolver Ocelot, Solid Snake, that sort of stuff.
Right. And for myself, Steel Samurai from the Atomic Rex series was obviously inspired by Pacific Rim as well.
Right. Your whole premise for Atomic Rex was essentially Pacific Rim if the main characters never defeated Slattern at the very end.
Exactly. So I think that what happened with this film is we loved the first film so much that it was, in the first place, it was going to be hard to live up to that. At least in the eyes of fans like me and you, I would say for sure.
Although it is possible, it is possible, because for people who aren't into giant monsters, I guess they generally view this as one of Guillermo del Toro's weaker films.
Agreed.
Compared to stuff like Labyrinth and Pan's Labyrinth and the Hellboy movies,
right?
Because they would just see this movie and they're like, hey, you know what? Giant monsters aren't my thing. It looks cool, but everything else is so weak, and I can't get myself into this giant monster robot madness. So, that's for people who aren't monster. I know there are also monster fans that are not into Pacific Rim like us. I know like Jeff Zornow vehemently detests Pacific Rim, but I get it. And for many people, this was one of the, like, Del Toro's lesser movies. It's kind of like an okay to average movie for some people. So there is definitely room for improvement for the sequel.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, for the larger movie-going public, I would say for sure. And even in this genre, although, like you said, I think Del Toro definitely made the first one as a gift to fans of old things like Ultraman and Gigantor and Space Giants.
Mazinger
yeah, I mean, go down the list.
Yeah.
Mazinger Z, right. Voltron. I mean, all those types of things was kind of like, and then of course Godzilla and Gamera and other monsters you saw in the mix there, which came together really, really well. And perhaps we as fans maybe put the film on a higher pedestal than it deserves to be, but it's whatever, we're fans.
Yeah, it's like, I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't give a damn. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Rocket punch, motherfuckers. Yeah.
Damn right.
Like I said, it just hits that sweet spot for me. It's got, and anytime I watch that movie, every single moment in that movie just makes me want to, raise my fist up in the air and go, fuck yeah.
Yeah,
and I'm like a little child. I'm singing along to the theme song.
Me too.
And of course, like, I reviewed this movie back when it came out with Gorazard, who would, funny enough, it was thanks to that review. That was my first collaboration with David Hernandez, Gorazard's real name, and that's what led me to be associated with him and the rest of his group of Godzilla YouTubers that we collectively call ourselves the Sons of Serizawa. And it was that review that kind of led to me being part of a larger, not small, but, for me at the time, a larger Godzilla YouTuber community that I hold near and dear to my heart to this day. So Pacific Rim has definitely brought about a number of great memories for me. And so, and again, like, as the years went by, it seemed like it was very unlikely for a Pacific Rim 2 to get made. And then there was the announcement that Del Toro was making Pacific Rim Maelstrom. I'm not sure if it's Maelstrom or Maelstorm. I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
I think it's Maelstrom. Yeah.
Maelstrom, yeah. I feel like I'm missing a vowel in there. Oh, well. But then there was the news that Del Toro was leaving. And, I'm sure many people were very sad because he was kind of like the linchpin in all of this. He was the guy who kind of made this possible. But then there was the announcement that Stephen S. DeKnight was going to be his replacement, essentially, and Del Toro was kind of in the background as sort of in a producing role. Although, let's see, nope, he had nothing to do with the screenplay. So Stephen S. DeKnight, he was a guy who's been mostly working on television. I think he's done mostly the Spartacus series on Starz. And he was also the showrunner for Daredevil on Netflix, and I really love the Netflix Daredevil series. And I was, he
also worked on Buffy and Angel, which were two really good shows.
And yeah. So he's got some good, he's got some decent TV cred, and so Pacific Rim Uprising was kind of like his first foray into the world of how would I call this, feature length films. And I was really confident that this would succeed. However, it feels like this was sort of a bad sign. Like, when the trailers first came out, a lot of people were skeptical. They weren't as into it. Some people were, like, you and I were. And then the reviews started coming in, and people were like, "Oh yeah, this is definitely not as good as the first movie." We've heard there was a lot of mixed reactions from a bunch of fans, and looking at it now, in terms of the fan base, it seemed like they were very excited for when the movie came out. Now that excitement has like kind of dropped, and barely anyone is talking about Pacific Rim Uprising in the fan base, from what I've seen.
Yeah, well, I think it's a couple reasons for that. For one was the film, it can be disappointing when you look at it, and then for two, it was quickly followed up by Ready Player One, which definitely had a lot of elements that fans of Pacific Rim would like, and then Rampage as well, which seems to be getting a lot more positive feedback.
Oh yeah, this one came in.
It's just a fun movie.
Yeah, this one, easily like Rampage easily came in and stole Pacific Rim Uprising's thunder. And this was all happening while I was in Japan, so I didn't get this movie until a month later, and it wasn't until
Right.
last week where I was able to finally watch the movie and see what all the hubbub was about, what all the hullabaloo was about, and make an opinion for myself. And yeah, I can definitely see why this was not setting the fan base on fire like the first movie was, and we'll definitely get into that. But before we go into that, it has been interesting looking at the fallout from this movie, because the first movie did not do well in America at all.
Right.
I remember this one infamously lost to Grown Ups 2 from one of Adam Sandler's movies. So it was like, oh boy, I was not a happy person that day when that news came out. But yeah, this one quickly fell off. The first movie quickly fell off the box, like the top five highest grossing movies of the month. But luckily, China came in and saved the day, because they were really into what Del Toro had to offer. And I guess this one was kind of like as a result of this movie's tumultuous production history, it seemed like this Warner Brothers did not want it to make the sequel, so they kind of had to lend the Pacific Rim franchise over to Universal. And then I think Universal may have teamed up with like a Chinese company so that both of them can co-produce the movie. And then I guess it was taking so long that Del Toro had to leave, because he wanted to he was doing the whole Shape of Water thing. And obviously, with those multiple Oscars, we all know how that panned out for him.
Right. Yeah.
This actually reminded me of how like Del Toro was previously attached to what was the Hobbit movies, because he was planning to make 2 Hobbit movies, but the studio didn't really want to make his version, so he was kicked out. He claimed that it was taking too long, so he had to leave, which is the same reason what he gives for here. But some people suggest or think that maybe he left because Warner Bros. Didn't like his version of The Hobbit, because he wanted to make a lighthearted fantasy family movie like the book, as opposed to making it a Lord of the Rings prequel, which is what they eventually made.
Right.
Here, it's like it's possible that maybe Del Toro left because they weren't going to let him do what he wanted to do with Pacific Rim Uprising. It's like maybe he was like he had a lot of ambitious ideas for this movie instead, and I guess like from what I've seen in the plot, it plays things rather safely. It never really felt like things were all the scale was all that much bigger than the first movie, and I think that's what Del Toro wanted to do. And funny enough, that also happened with Hellboy 3. He wanted to make a bigger movie for the third Hellboy movie, but the production company said no, we want to make this more smaller, and he's like, okay, you're better off doing a reboot without me to have your smaller scale Hellboy movie, lower budgeted Hellboy movie. So it's sadly like Del Toro is this guy with like a lot of talent, a lot of imagination, a lot of that passion that drives him, and he keeps getting screwed over by Hollywood.
Right. I was going to say, I've also heard or seen a few people suggest that he left when this went to Universal because he was also trying to get Universal to let him make Creature from the Black Lagoon, which they didn't want to do, and they went with the Tom Cruise Mummy movie instead, which worked out terribly for him. And then
so yeah, it probably like sour his relationship with Universal. It's like, what the fuck? They're going to make a sequel. They're going to make a sequel of my kaiju movie. Fuck them.
Right. All right. And nobody even had sex with a fish in this movie. It's ridiculous.
Although someone does have sex, apparently has mind sex with a kaiju brain.
True. Very true.
It's like it's not as sexy.
Yeah.
I quit.
It's not a fish.
It's not to be a fish man.
Oh, I'm not doing his show any justice. Where's he at? He does a much better Del Toro.
I'm not even sure what accent I'm really going for with this one, with Del Toro. I'm almost making him sound Romanian, like Dracula. I'm Dracula.
Yeah.
I'm the great Del Toro. Now, excuse me, I have to go make a bunch of Oscar movies with my fetish film. I mean, my horror romance movie. Del Toro out. So yeah, I
Uh,
guess he didn't want, probably, in our minds, he probably did not want to work with Universal for perhaps a number of reasons, and so we're
right.
left with a bunch of people coming in with. In the case of Stephen S. Knight, it seemed like he really wasn't up for the job, because I get the feeling that going into this movie, that after watching it, Del Toro seems to be the kind of person who knows what he wants. He has a clear vision for things, and will work his damnedest to make sure that vision comes to life, or that the final product is as close as it can be to his vision. With Stephen S. Knight, because he comes from a TV background, I have a feeling that maybe he was more of a pushover, where maybe he was hired because he was more of someone who could be a sort of yes man to the higher studios, and thus did not have that kind of power that Del Toro had. And this has been a reoccurring trend in Hollywood, where a lot of big studios would have their giant tentpole, big budget action movies and give them to like first time, second time, third time directors, saying like, we're gonna give you a star, we're gonna give you a chance to be a star, kid. We're gonna give you the chance to work on a big budget movie. You just have to do whatever we tell you to do. And they have obviously more power over these smaller indie actors, as opposed to a bigger person like Del Toro or Tim Burton or Spielberg or Tarantino.
Right, but we've seen it work out at WB more or less with like Jordan Vogt Roberts hadn't really done a whole lot before Kong Skull Island,
Right.
and that came together fairly well. And then
There was also
even Gareth Edwards,
Gareth
right?
Edwards with Godzilla, and he eventually got what was it, Rogue One? Although both movies have had their divisive audiences, so
True.
You can go either way with how in terms of interpreting Gareth Edwards' results. But but then again, this we have to remember, this is not Warner Brothers this time. This is Universal, and
Right.
recently, outside of the Fast and Furious movies, Universal hasn't had outside of Fast and the Furious and the Despicable Me Minion movies, the Illumination Entertainment animated movies.
Jurassic World, I guess.
Jurassic World, yeah. They haven't really been able to do a whole lot outside of like those three franchises. And even then, I know Jurassic World was like a huge success, but again, that was also another movie that had its own fair share of problems.
Oh no, I just think in terms of box office in that case.
Right. Yeah. In terms of box office, yeah. And of course, the Universal had their own, disaster last year with the Mummy movie with Tom Cruise, and so I guess they're going to try to do another franchise here, especially with that tacked on ending. So let's get into things, because this movie it did not do good. Once again, history repeats itself again. It's like poetry; it sort of rhymes. Each stanza rhymes with the last. And this time, it seems like China is not even going to help save this movie. So let's finally get into things. So this movie takes place roughly 10 years after the events of the Battle of the Breach, where the former Jaeger pilot Jake Pentecost is where the pilot Stacker Pentecost, who was played by what was his name? I'm blanking now.
Idris Elba.
Thank you very much.
Elba.
He ended up sacrificing himself within the finale, the climax of the first Pacific Rim movie. So for this movie, we follow his son, Jake Pentecost, played by John Boyega, who you might know as Finn from the Star Wars episodes 7, 8, and presumably 9.
Right.
So he plays kind of like a former Jaeger pilot, or at least like a Jaeger pilot trainee. He's been living on, like the black market of the Los Angeles area, stealing Jaeger parts and selling them for money. He's kind of living day by day. He's like while at the same time living kind of like somewhat of a party life. And one day he comes across a young girl who stole a piece of Jaeger tech that he was going after, and this girl was using it to build her own like scrapyard Jaeger of her own. And so, or as they kind of call them, rogue Jaegers, which are like these unofficial Jaegers that people have been trying to make, which I do like that. I like that bit of world building at the very very beginning. In fact, I feel like you could make a whole movie out of that.
Yeah, there are some good threads in this film that they didn't go with long enough, I felt like.
Right. Let's see.
You know, to really establish some cool parts to it. With that being one of them, the fact that there's like people kind of building rogue Jaegers.
And in fact, I actually thought that this was going to be like a good Jaeger versus bad Jaeger kind of movie. And the trailers kind of teased that with the appearance of Obsidian Fury, which is like this sleek black Jaeger, kind of like an evil Gypsy Danger sort of deal, because he's got like the same bladed weapons. But unfortunately, kind of goes all over the place, and we'll explain that later. So Jake, he meets this girl named Amara. Both of them get captured by the Pan-Pacific Corps, and they're like, oh, hey, we know you, you're Jake. We actually need your help. We're running low on men, so we need your help to train all these new young Jaeger pilots. And that was like one of my first issues with the plot. It's like, this guy has a bad reputation. He was disgracefully discharged from your services. Why do you want him out of all these people to pilot the Jaegers? I mean, to train the Jaeger pilots? And we see that Jake, he is, the stepbrother of what was Makomori, the former pilot of Gypsy Danger, who is from the first Pacific Rim movie. So Makomori, she is like kind of like this. They have like a brother-sister relationship, and again, that's another issue with the plot, because Jake was never at all mentioned in the first movie, because I'm sure Del Toro had no idea he had existed, because Mako was supposed to be like his sort of adopted daughter figure. That was his like he acted as a surrogate father figure to Makomori. So having Jake in on all of this kind of complicates matters when you go back and watch the first movie, because when you see this like father and daughter relationship on screen, you're probably going to now think to yourself, where's Jake in all of this? How come he's not mentioned?
Exactly. I was going to say one of the biggest issues I think that you have with this film, and that I have with it, and that a lot of fans do, is that it seems like the people who wrote this didn't go back and watch the first movie. They kind of just got the cliff notes for it, and,
right.
Filled in there.
And it's something I've seen a lot in fiction, where it's like, oh, here's the son we've never mentioned up until now. It kind of reminds me of, like, off the top of my head, something like what was it? It was Getter-Robo Arc, where Getter-Robo Arc, like within the last storyline in the canonical story in the Getter-Robo saga, Getter-Robo Go, the main character essentially died and disappeared. So now for the next story arc, it's like, oh, here's his son from his wife that we never mentioned up until now.
Right, exactly. He's just there. And even things like grabbing the Amara character to be a Jaeger pilot didn't make a whole lot of sense, because she had built a Jaeger and only piloted it one time. Maybe grabbing her to be a engineer would have been a much more sensible move.
I guess so. Yeah, you're right about that. I can easily tell that. I can easily understand why they would take Amara, because she obviously had some talent if she was able to do this all by herself. But to have a delinquent like Jake and ask him to help out these people, and it's also like, we need your help because your former partner Nate, played by Scott Eastwood, I believe the son of
Clint Eastwood.
Yeah. He is I need a Jaeger pilot I need a partner to pilot my Jaeger with, and you're the only person who's up for the job. It's like, really? You couldn't find another Jaeger pilot amongst like the entire Pan-Pacific Corps to train these people? Also, it's not like you're actually going to be piloting a Jaeger to help train these people. You're simply there to do everything but pilot a robot. And even then, if you later in the movie when they needed Gypsy Avenger to like perform like bodyguard duties, you still have like 4 other Jaegers around on the base.
Right. They didn't necessarily need Gypsy Avenger specifically to do that, especially when there's really no need for concern, because they hadn't really established even up to that point that rogue Jaegers were an issue. Like the Scrapper Jaeger that's built is like an eighth the size of the other Jaegers.
Yeah. Although we did see
we see it. So
in the brief little montage, we do see like one full size rogue Jaeger like walking about.
Right, but it didn't really seem like a threat. It seemed like a drunk person was driving it, as opposed
Right.
to like a group of terrorists or something that had Jaegers. It didn't come across in that respect.
Right.
So,
So eventually, the new, the old Vanguard, or because like the new old Vanguard is teaching the new Vanguard about piloting, and then there's some complications arise when this Chinese company, which is led by this one Chinese character whose name I could not bother to remember, she
yeah,
who has a returning character.
Jing Tin as the actress as Li Wen Xiao.
Shao. Okay, Shao. Okay, I'll refer to her as Shao. So Shao has
Xiao.
Newt from character from the first movie, played by Charlie Day, helping her to create these Jaeger drones, which are big giant robots that are remotely piloted from the base, from her own base at I think Shao Industries, and it could potentially put the Jaeger pilots out of business in terms of piloting robots on the battlefield. And while that is all that complication is going on, we have a rogue Jaeger in the form of Obsidian Fury who attempts to make a ruckus. He kicks Gypsy Avenger's ass and ends up killing Mako Mori. A scene that it's like, okay, I appreciate you had the balls to kill off a character from the first movie, but with so few characters here in this returning characters in this movie, it gives me the feeling that these writers simply did not give a fuck about the first movie and its cast.
Exactly.
Especially when you have what's his name, Charlie Hunnam, not reprising his role as let's see, what was his character's name? Raleigh. And so they didn't even bother mentioning what happened to him. Nor did you think at least Mako Mori would drop a hint as to what happened to him, but no, it's like
nothing.
It's like they acknowledge he existed because it's like we're gonna do something that the old Jaeger pilots would be proud of from 10 years ago, like Mako Mori and Stacker Pentecost and Raleigh Beckett. It's like, okay, so he still exists in this universe,
right?
But
I would have thought they could have brought back to Hercules, not Hernandez, right? The guy who was his son and they drifted together.
Right. The son died alongside Stacker Pentecost, but the father, the Australian father, he was still around, and he's nowhere to be seen there. You could have him train these pilots.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. The Strike Eureka pilot, right? Strike Eureka's pilot.
Right.
The first one.
Even if he's too old to pilot anymore, he can still be there for coaching. So it's like all these characters kind of are brushed are banished from existence, and we have Mako Mori who's was killed off. Charlie Day, they fucked him over real bad, and then there's Gottlieb, and Gottlieb he's like of the three returning characters, he's the one who is the most the least messed with, I think.
Right. Yeah.
So, these characters now have to find out the identity of Obsidian Fury as they end up finding a larger conspiracy that involves bringing the kaiju back to our world and potentially destroying the world all over again. So the new old Vanguard and the new Vanguard has to team up to take out the new enemies.
And I mean, I don't know when he was taken more into the plot, but I think that was where they really lost it for me. I thought they had a decent idea actually that they were running with, and then they lost it.
It seemed like it was kind of aimless because it's like they were trying to do so many different things. It's like they were trying to do a jack of all trades, master of none deal, where it's like, okay, we want to do rogue Jaegers, we want to do people surviving in the aftermath of the kaiju war from 10 years ago. We want to do old new pilots meets old young pilots, which is kind of again strange because we are not familiar at all with these old pilots. In fact, we only ever get to meet two of the old pilots, and everyone else are a bunch of annoying kids played by who turn out to be forgettable by the end, outside of Amara. In fact, Jake Jake and Amara are the only new characters that I really were interested in. They kind of got some chemistry going on, almost like an older brother, younger sister sort of deal.
Right.
But everyone else feels so forgettable. Like I could barely remember like Scott Eastwood's character's name, and I can't be bothered to remember any of the kids' names who end up becoming the new pilots for the what was it, Saber Athena, what was it, Bracer Phoenix, and the Whip one. I always forgot that Jaeger's name because, again, even the Jaegers I feel like were
kind of forgettable.
Very forgettable, yeah. And, people can have their own different opinions, They can say, oh, I like the new Jaegers. Awesome. Great for you. I'm glad about that. But for these Jaegers, they felt much more generic with their more streamlined appearances, and they all kind of have this more basic humanoid athletic build, whereas the other one had these weird, crazy, wild shapes that made them more unique. Even like Striker Eureka and Striker Eureka, Coyote Tango, and
Crimson Typhoon?
No, Gypsy Danger. These were the ones that looked the most humanoid, but they still had very unique.
Oh, okay.
I want to say they had more unique outlines. If you can have a distinct outline or have a distinct feature, that can make you look cool. But where these guys, it's like Bracer Phoenix, he's the most bulkiest, and that makes him more unique. And Saber Athena is more slimmed down. So there was potential there for interesting Jaegers if they were able to kick some ass. And there is a lot of action with them. But I feel like the action wasn't. It's at the same time. It's like, again, more very interesting ideas, but just like sloppy execution. Where the Jaeger battles never caught my attention as much as the giant robot battles from the first movie. And
I totally agree. I would agree with that.
And there's a major problem I have with the action scenes that I'll get into later. But let's see. Yeah. So. The kaiju war aftermath, the old generation meets new generation, the idea of rogue Jaegers, an evil Jaeger, the idea of like a potentially evil rival organization with the Jaeger drones, Jaeger kaiju hybrids. That was probably the most interesting for me because that was an idea that Del Toro wanted to do.
Yes, I was going to say, I thought that was the best idea, and that's what they should have stuck with.
Right.
Do you want me to tell you why? It's a little spoilery at this point, I guess. But
Not yet. Not quite yet. I don't want to get into spoilers yet. But then there was the, again, bringing new kaiju back, but you only have 3 of them, and then the idea of a combiner kaiju, which I don't think we've ever really seen, or we probably have in, like, Ultraman or something, but this is the time where we've had, like, a big, like, perhaps the most noticeable edition of a combiner Jaeger. I guess there was also, like, what was it, Giga Chimera from, like, one of the Ultraman movies, but we had Mega Kaiju with that, and let's see, Kaiju's, the aliens trying to take over human minds so they can sneak into the new world, like, infiltrate the real world, our world. So all these different ideas are very interesting. But at the end of the day, it's just everything just feels so sloppy and half-assed throughout the entire movie.
Well, it's because they had too many potential plot points going on, and none of them were really well developed. And then the fact that we were kind of introduced to our heroes before there was really a threat was kind of odd, too. Do you know what I mean? Like, I felt like there was no need to necessarily go back and get the Pentecost character at first, because, like you said, there's any other number of people who could have trained this new group of Jaeger pilots. Now, right. If there was a worldwide
threat, kind of like the first movie where they went after Raleigh because they were so they were so low on Jaeger pilots, they needed every man they can get with experience.
Right.
To the point where even like Sacker Pentecost had to come in at the last minute.
Yes, that would have made a lot more sense as opposed to getting him ahead of time. Having said that, I did think John Boyega did a pretty good job with what he had as far as his acting in this movie. What did you think about that?
Yeah, he was kind of playing like a cocky character. Although what kind of hindered his character for me was that it kind of felt like his backstory, when we eventually got it, didn't really mesh with his actions and motivations. Where it's
I agree with that. Yeah,
he wanted to be a Jaeger pilot. He was too ambitious and wanted to try going at it alone, and which kind of sets up his character arc of wanting to or of needing to rely on other people instead of going out by himself. But he was considered a disgrace by his father, so he left, and now he wants to enjoy being someone who steals Jaeger parts, and so now he was given a second chance. It's like if he was someone who aspired to get a second chance, that would probably make more sense for him to join the Pan-Pacific Corps. But Mako Mori comes in and saying, like, we want you to rejoin us. And he was like, no, fuck that. It's like, I thought you wanted to be a pilot. Why are you suddenly against this? Wouldn't you want to have that second chance?
Right.
And then he talks about wanting that second chance and wanting that redemption. It's like, do you want the redemption or do you not want it?
Right, and they didn't really do a good job of filling in the relationship with him and Stacker. Like, they played it up where he's going back because Stacker had died, and he never resolved these issues with his father.
But then again, he was so resistant in the first place and kept acting like a spoiled brat, saying, "I'm only doing this so I can do this so I can go home and go back home and relax. I don't want to be a Jaeger pilot, or I'm only doing this because I'm being told to, or I'll you can kiss my ass goodbye in a couple months."
Right, but this if they had played it up where he was trying to redeem himself to his dad who's not there anymore, I feel like that would have been a more interesting story to grip us into. That, like, if he picks it up where Stacker's dead, they still need pilots. I'm going to go back and try to fill my dad's shoes even though he's not here, to take that next step. But they didn't really do that, like you said. And then there was that ridiculous, I guess, love triangle. I don't know.
That was so fucking pointless. It's like, who is that woman, by the way? I think they kind of said she was like, she was...
I think she's an engineer or a tech.
Okay, yeah, she was an engineer tech person, but then they kind of said she was a Jaeger pilot, but she left to join the tech side. And then it's like, Jake tried to flirt with her, but then, like, Nate was like, hey, don't get any ideas. And then she ends up, like, kissing both of them by the end, and Jake was like, well, that was confusing. Except, like, those are the only two. That's it. I just went over the entirety of the love triangle subplot. Just those two moments. Yeah, spoilers, yeah. So,
yeah, but that is literally it.
That's it. It was so pointless. It's like, why did you do that? So you can have another female character, an adult female character there besides Mako Mori, who you already killed at that point? It's like...
Right. And
what is the point?
They didn't establish her at all. They just left the whole thing hanging about, like, was she interested in one or the other, or was she trying to get them riled up to go into battle? I don't know, but it was just pointless, like you said. It super confusing and pointless.
And let's see. So at this point, I feel like we can go into spoilers now, because now I want to get into, like, the Shao Industries with the Li Wen Shao and Newt. So
yes.
They're creating these Jaeger drones, and Shao, she seems to be, like, played up as the bad guy and the person behind Obsidian Fury. And they try to do a fake out where it turns out Newt was the bad guy the whole time. And
yeah,
they did so by saying that Newt was being poisoned by the alien. His mind was being taken over by the aliens from the first movie. The what do you call it? The
Drift.
No. The name of the aliens, they were called the Precursors, I think.
Yeah.
So the Precursors, they were able to invade his mind using an idea from the first movie, which, okay, I'll give them credit there.
Yeah.
And given the fact that he was also had this love for kaiju, so that was another thing that could have made his mind more weak than Gottlieb. So they take over his mind, and they make him infiltrate Shao's business so that he can infuse artificial kaiju DNA or blood into these drones, including Obsidian Fury, as it's later found out. And so he then uses this technology to turn the drones into Jaeger kaiju drones and open up portals to get new monsters out. And then these monsters as it turns out, the kaiju were trying to go to Japan the whole time, which makes no fucking sense, because the kaiju were going the opposite direction in the first movie. Right.
Like heading towards Alaska. Why would they do that? Why not just swim right the fuck to Japan? It's right there in the ocean.
Yeah.
But
like, why'd you go to China?
Australia. Take your pick, right?
Yeah. San Francisco with Trespasser.
Right.
As it turns out, in this movie, they retconned it to where all the monsters, the reason why they were going around the Pacific Rim was not because the portal was in the Pacific Rim to begin with. No, it was because these kaiju were trying to go to Mount Fuji because their blood is explosive, I guess, and they want to erupt Mount Fuji, which would cause a chain reaction that could terraform the planet, even though that's what the kaiju were there for in the first place in the first movie.
Right, and bunch of issues with that. They never established in the first one that their blood was explosive. It wasn't like in Jeremy Robinson's Project Nemesis. He does a really good job of explaining that the kaiju's blood is explosive. You can't really shoot it. They shot the hell out of those monsters.
They ripped off Jeremy Robinson.
They did, bastards. We're looking out for you, JR.
Yeah. You bastards. I should have known.
But it was not established in the first film that their blood was explosive. That it was toxic, yes, but certainly not explosive, right? With the amount of firepower that they shot at those things.
Yeah. I remember clearly this one scene where Gypsy Danger was like, "Let's check for a pulse." Pachoo, pachoo, pachoo. Right. And they're shooting the fuck out of Leatherback. So you'd think that he'd explode at that point.
Right. Like that was the one issue there. The whole Mount Fuji thing was ridiculous. I'm assuming they went with it just because of so many monster battles, in the Toho series have taken place on Mount Fuji. But that was just dumb. They could have picked a point like, I don't know, really nowhere, because the monsters were heading out from the Pacific. They couldn't really retcon that to work out to any extent. Yeah. No, I did think that, like you said, because Del Toro had it at first, there was some merit to the idea of the kaiju Jaeger, and I think in my opinion, the hybrid, the way to do it would have been, it sucked a little bit to have Newt, who was one of the more endearing characters in the first film, to kind of go over the deep end. But if they explained, well, he drifted with a monster, and that he had access to monster parts, and his mind is corrupted, so he's now trying to carry out the Precursor's mission in this next step of making like this army of kaiju Jaeger hybrids and just having them destroy the planet because that's what the Precursor is trying to do. I think that would have worked better. The whole opening up a portal was just stupid because they've never really established that how the portal was made or that
how these drones were able to do such a thing, or how they were able to insert kaiju DNA into these drones without nobody fucking noticing. Right. It's like it's like the Transformers movies where they treat their audience as brain dead idiots who are just there for the fights and nothing else. Which, okay, I'll admit, a good portion of the fans are just there for the fights and nothing else.
Right.
I mean, that's why the Transformers are so popular. But for me, I prefer something like substance. And, criticize the first movie all you want. That thing at least made sense. You could say this movie is more ambitious. But the thing is, the beauty with the first movie was it was so simple, it worked. It tried to overcomplicate things.
Exactly. It was just, I know you haven't seen it, but Rampage goes kind of along those same lines. Like, it's just mindless fun and simple, and for the most part, it works. We'll talk about more after you see it. But they didn't do that. Like, had they just had Newt corrupt, say, just the drones and send them out because his mind was all effed up, then I feel like that would have been a better story. And then they go get Pentecost, like, okay, we've got like this army of rogue drones now, and we need actual pilots to step in and fight them. So then you would have had that kind of
army versus army sort of deal.
Army versus army, right? And then you would have had like, is it better to have a human piloting this or to have machines piloting it? Kind of like we would see like in the Godzilla versus Mecha Godzillas, where you get the play of like the living thing versus the straight up robot controlling it, or maybe Terminator-ish. You could have been along those lines. I think it would have worked out a lot better and been a lot more streamlined.
Maybe you could have had like maybe you could have like the Jaeger drones slowly corrupt over time and mutate into distinct designs if you want.
Exactly.
First off, I do want to say I do like the idea, and I do love the design of these Jaeger kaiju drones, because it reminds me a lot of End of Evangelion, where you see like the mass-produced Jaegers. You've probably never seen Evangelion, but they involve like.
I have.
Oh, okay. So like the white mass-produced Jaegers with those like creepy mouths and red lips and like vulture wings. I feel like this was like more of an homage to that, and good on them. But yeah, it's like they did that stupid thing where it's like as soon as they turn off. I hate that trope in movies where it's like as soon as you turn off the switch, all the drone soldiers immediately power down.
Right. That was That was dumb.
That was disappointing.
Going back to
Oh, and then
yeah, it's like Star
somehow
Wars Episode One ish, right?
also they conveniently somehow killed all the or incapacitated all of the older Jaeger pilots, so that we had to now focus on the boring child character, teenage characters to now pilot the Jaegers.
Right, again, exactly. So with the other Jaegers are there, where you get these characters that we really have no connection to, and they just kind of throw them in there. Again, like bring back Raleigh, bring back Hercules, bring back some of the guys from the first one that were still alive. I know most of them died, but there's those two at least. Like, how much more fans been pleased if those two had appeared, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and that reminded me when they were getting ready for the final battle, only like right before like the third act, at that point we finally had the Pacific Rim theme song. So it's like that's another complaint where it's like, for A, you barely use the Pacific Rim theme song, and B, this soundtrack, this score is nowhere near as good as the first one.
Right, right. Just another missed opportunity. Because the first one is so good. The first one, like you said, the music's right up there, like with the music you get from the Godzilla movies, where like when you hear like the military march in the Godzilla movies, it gets you like pumped up. There's going to be a fight, or when Godzilla appears, and he has like his music.
Yeah. I still
it's very ominous.
I still remember the theme when they had Otachi invading Hong Kong. Bum 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 bum.
Right.
Bum 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 bum. If I'm able to remember that off the top of my head, like 5 years later, you did your job well. With this one, I can barely remember anything.
No, I don't remember much either. So, and then bringing the other monsters out from the portal, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. So they established, okay, here's new portals that just collapsed on themselves. Last time it took a nuke to make them collapse, but in this case, you shut the robots off and the portals stop. And then like you said too, the combiner kaiju, like, and then I guess Newt just kind of had these nanotech things made up to bring them together, sort of like the Dark Heart from the Justice League Unlimited episode, where they just grab anything and bring it together.
Yeah,
but
the way they designed these the mega kaiju, that was really weird, where it's like, how? It's like, where did these like little snake drones can't come from?
Right, and then they just run over everything. Like, as I was watching them, at first I thought, like, oh, these things are going to be like locusts or something, just take out the Jaegers by, just climbing on top and picking them apart. No, they're just going to Devastator up these other kaijus and bring them together. Which, if they're going to do a combiner thing, wouldn't it make more sense to have the the rogue Jaegers combined?
Yeah, have like the Jaeger drones, because they're already robots.
Right, exactly. I think people would have bought that more from Transformers and other genres where you have robots that can interconnect to build a bigger robot. Power Rangers, for instance, people are used to that kind of thing, and not biological creatures just doing that on a whim.
Yeah. So, like, looking at we talked a little bit about the Jaegers for this movie, and how they all kind of have this very streamlined aesthetic, and the only thing that's really separating them is like their color. Guardian Bravo, that was the one whose name I forgot, had the whip. Obsidian Fury, he's got the sleek, slim design, but I think he kind of works for the most part, especially with that like black, that simple black design with the red faceplate. Unfortunately, he turned out to be like a drone and did not have any sort of real pilot, so I just lost any connection I had with like that Obsidian Fury if he turns out to be just a non-entity, like a non-character.
Right.
Let's see. And, so as for the monsters themselves, Raijin was probably the only kaiju that was memorable in any sort of way. I like even though he's kind of just took an idea that was borrowed from Raiju. Raiju was like the monster with the open-up face from the first movie. So this one also does the same gimmick, although he has his power where he's able to absorb kinetic energy, and he's able to launch it right back at his opponent. And,
he ate the same stuff Black Panther did, I read somewhere else. Right?
Yeah, and Raijin and Raiju, they had that same concept. I want to say they were inspired by I think it was Gabora from the original Ultraman, whose face was also hidden in some armor that would open up and reveal his true face.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But still, even then, I think Raijin was perhaps the only monster that was memorable because Strikehorn and Hakuja kind of felt the same to me. One just walks on all his legs, and the other one walks on two legs. And in fact, like Strikehorn looks like a copy and paste of Slattern. Just he has two tails instead of three tails, but he still has the hammerhead motif.
Which I think is what you mentioned before about the Jaegers in the first one. I felt the kaiju from the first one were much more memorable. Like Knifehead was only on for a brief time, but everybody remembers Knifehead. Certainly, Leatherback. You know, everybody remembers Leatherback. Otachi, right?
Yeah.
Like these monsters looked different enough where they made an impression in you, and you know, the fans really took to them, right? I mean, most people I know love those three monsters at least.
Yeah. I know some people have their issues with the last three monsters, but you know, you could still give credit to the first three on-screen monsters, and even then, you know, in the larger universe, there was like there's Trespasser, you know, the one with the axe, also known as Axehead. There's Karloff, who is like kind of like this Frankenstein Groot-like kaiju.
Yes.
But even with these monsters, you know, it looks like there was a reason why only Raijin was the only kaiju to ever get an actual figure released of him. Because, like, and also another weird thing is that there was this cool aesthetic that all the kaiju had in the first movie, where they all had like this dark skin with these like tribal-looking glow-in-the-dark tattoos.
Right.
That whole tattoo design is lost with these Jaegers because they all have this strange reddish-brown skin texture to all of them.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that works in the first one is they looked at real animals to kind of get their inspiration. Like Knifehead was obviously inspired by a shark, and Leatherback by a gorilla. Where it just felt like that Raijin was just kind of like slapped together. Like you couldn't look at that and identify it as being inspired.
Mm-hmm. He's just a monster. He's not really based on any sort of animal whatsoever.
Right.
But yeah, and then I would say Mega Kaiju, he does look really cool, and they do play up his strength a lot very well. I just wish that now this, I guess we'll be going into like the fight scenes, but like with the final battle, I hate how it kind of devolved into into a rehash of the first movie, where all the Jaegers are essentially gone, so it's up to Gypsy Danger to be the one to sacrifice itself in order to take out the bad guy, which is exactly what happens here, only much more stupid because so I'm sorry if I'm jumping all over the place, but with the first
the movie does, so why shouldn't you?
True. So within near the climax, they established that, you know, they want to create these giant jetpacks that are powerful enough to launch a Jaeger from where was their base? Like Sydney, I think.
I think so. Again, I can't remember.
Or maybe it was in Hong Kong. But to launch them from their base all the way to Japan. You know, kick-ass idea, you know, flying Jaegers with big giant jetpacks. That's awesome.
That explode. Yep.
However, it's like, then by the end, it's like, the Mega Kaiju is almost at the Mount Fuji volcano. So it turns out they have this one single rocket from the jetpack welded to Gypsy Avenger's arm. And somehow, even though Gypsy Avenger needed an entire jetpack for him to fly, apparently that single rocket is enough to lift him up in the air.
Right, into the stratosphere. And then, even before they got to that point, Nate's character was injured. He couldn't pilot Gypsy Avenger anymore. And Amara, who couldn't sync with anybody, was able to finally sync with somebody, I guess, to pilot her Jaeger, but then could automatically sync with Pentecost's character when she jumped into Gypsy Avenger. And it was like, I feel like that was like weird too. Like, okay, they really established in the first film again how difficult it was to find somebody you could drift with, you know?
Yeah. And she was able to conveniently drift with these people that she quickly forged a relationship with when she piloted Bracer Phoenix. And it makes sense, at least for Jake Pentecost, because, you know, they've been establishing this relationship since the beginning of the movie.
Right, but from the first one, I didn't even take it necessarily that it was the relationship. It was just more perhaps like the way that people's thought processes were or brains were constructed, because in some cases you had like familial relationships, like it was father son
Yeah.
or brother to brother, and in other cases like they mentioned that they had to do like a lot of psychological testing to find somebody who could sing with Raleigh, and it was Mach who came out on top, even though Stacker tried to hide that. It wasn't just like they could grab random people and throw them in there, or even people that Raleigh was friends with, for
Yeah.
that matter. The
Right.
only person
Right.
that we knew prior to that was Stacker, who had cancer of some kind and was dying, and then seemed more like just like a robot than anything. He wasn't, very emotional towards anybody, but he was able to just sync with one person. But they did at least establish that he carries nothing in there, and that he
Right.
was a long time Jaeger pilot. So maybe he knew some way around it, where Amara like had nothing going on, and then could just jump in and then fill that role with multiple different partners. So it was like, you know.
Right. And let's see. So by the time we got to the finale, with the whole launching, at first I thought like when they welded that rocket into Gypsy's arm, I thought they were going to do like a literal rocket punch, which would have been really cool. But no, it turns out
Yeah, that's what I thought.
it was there just for flying him up in the air, which looks stupid as hell. And then, he just ends up doing, pulling an Iron Giant and just,
Yeah.
blowing himself up, which is what the Gypsy did in the last movie. So this brings me to my point. I really wish with all these Jaegers that we had more like a team element here, with all these Jaegers like coming together to put an end to Mega Kaiju. This is something that Destroy All Monsters did beautifully, with all the monsters
Exactly.
working together to bring down King Ghidorah. Instead,
Right.
Mega Kaiju just wipes out all the other Kaiju, and make them go out with little fanfare, just so the Gypsy Avenger can go at it alone, which to me is far less interesting than having a bunch of robots tackling a monster at the same time and overcoming it.
Right, exactly. I thought we were going to get a bunch of them working together. The Destroy All Monsters comparison is totally correct. Where there should have been something more like that, where we saw them all having to attack from different angles and stuff like that, and using their superior intelligence, but we didn't get any of that.
Right.
So.
And this leads me to my biggest issue with Pacific Rim, because, for many people, they're like, yeah, the movie's not that good, but the action was still okay. Even people who like the movie, they comment on the action and nothing else. So for me, I was like, okay, it looks like the action is all I'm really going to get from this movie, so what do you got for me, Pacific Rim Uprising? And here's the thing. The biggest issue I had with this movie is the collateral damage. And, I'm the kind of person who loves to see giant monsters, wreck shit, because, they're giant monsters. They don't give a damn about humanity. They're very selfish creatures. But when you have giant robot characters, these are piloted by human beings, supposedly trained human beings, who are there to protect, humanity. But here it's like they did not even give a damn about it. I feel like they got the filmmakers were taking, even though this movie I would say is leagues better than the Transformers movies, where it's
I
like
agree with that.
somewhat it's like comprehensible, like for the most part, until you start thinking too much deep into things. It does carry over a sort of mentality in terms of their approach to the fight scenes, where it's like, have these characters destroy as much shit as possible on screen and not give a damn about any of the characters to begin with. And the thing is, you could say, oh, all the humans, they evacuated safely, so it's okay for them to destroy all these buildings. Here's the thing, they keep going back to shots of these people conveniently jumping out of the way of these giant monsters and robots, so that tells us that there are still people in this city that our Jaeger pilots simply do not care for. It's like, in the first movie, you could tell that these Jaeger pilots were at least trying their damnedest to prevent the fights from going into the city. And then even when the Jaeger fight between Otachi and Gypsy Danger, even though their fight Gypsy Danger, yeah. Even though their fight went into the city, you can tell the Gypsy Danger was like still trying its best not to cause as much casualties. Even when he was flying, he tried at least, landing in that, I think it was a baseball stadium,
Right.
after, being dropped off by Otachi. So in this movie, they simply do not care because it's like there's this part where Gypsy Avenger gets a bunch of cars with his like levitating gravity gun and throws them at one of the kaiju. It's like, dude, there could be people in those cars. Or there's a part where he's using that same weapon to literally drop buildings on top of not mega kaiju, but one of the kaiju. Like Shin Godzilla style, but at least with Shin Godzilla, they had like 2 weeks. They had like 2 weeks or so to, get everybody evacuated from Tokyo. But here it's like, it's reckless, it's sloppy. It's like they do not care about humanity. It's like, dude, what the hell? You're supposed to protect the city, not destroy it. And it's that I know it's like they do that because they think smashing buildings on kaiju is cool, and as a young child who wants to see big monsters go smashy smashy, I can understand why they did that. But again, for me, on a subconscious level, I can't help but think of all the people that they're killing with all their reckless tactics. And for some people, they can just ignore it and just appreciate the visuals. For me, that's something I cannot overcome on subjective level. It's something I tried so hard to look past that, but I simply can't, and that's the reason why I cannot enjoy the majority of the fight scenes here, with the exception of perhaps the Arctic battle between Gypsy Avenger and Obsidian Fury, where it's just two robots in the middle of nowhere duking it out. You have we have Jake Pentecost, getting revenge for the death of Mako Mori, so there's some emotional weight there for once. And, that's the one thing where it actually works. Here, it's like, it's just that civilian casualty kept bothering me so much that I couldn't enjoy the final battle, nor, like, most of the battles here.
Well, and the issues would be, I think, that they had established there was a short time window. Like in Shin Godzilla, there's literally like 2 weeks where I'm not going to get this too much, but Godzilla's sitting on doesn't do squat, and then they decide, okay, we got to drop buildings on if he gets up. In this case, they really had to strap these rockets onto the Jaeger's back because there's no other way to get them there quick enough.
Right.
Now, and I was thinking the same thing. There's no way you could possibly have gotten a city evacuated in 30 minutes, give or take. Now, had they played into that more, and that we know we're killing people when we rip these buildings down, but we're doing it to stop the monster from destroying the entire planet, and like had the pilot struggle with that, that would have added on something for me. But they didn't do that. I mean, what do you think? If they had added that layer onto it, like, we know this is costing lives, but it's for the greater good type of thing.
Right. It's kind of like there's like almost a tone deaf to this movie, where it's like it wants to take itself as seriously as the first movie, and then in some cases they want to take itself in a more wacky direction. Like, if this was more like wacky, or even like Guardians of the Galaxy sort of deal, maybe it would be less of a problem, because you can tell the movie's not trying to take itself seriously. Kind of like Megas XLR. Megas XLR, it's like a animated series where it's like Coop, he destroys New Jersey like every single episode, and it's supposed to be funny because this is like a very silly parody it's a parody / homage of Super Robot anime. So it's funny when Coop does it. Here it's like because it tries to take itself more seriously, it's like there's that feeling of this feeling, how do you call it, disassociating feeling that just takes, at least for me anyways, takes me out of the movie, where it's like, we establish that there are lives here, innocent lives here, civilian lives here, and that it's your job to protect them, and you're not doing a good job due to your actions. In fact, there's this one scene where Obsidian Fury, he sticks his swords into the sides of these two buildings in order to keep them from falling. That's like something you would expect a bad guy to do, because he doesn't care about hurting people around him. Saber Athena does the exact same thing, where I'm going to call it a she because it's a name.
I got it.
She whips out her swords, is running towards the kaiju while her swords are slicing through the buildings next to her. What is wrong with you? That's like that. You would just establish that that's a bad guy behavior, and you're having a good guy perform that same behavior.
Right, and in that case, you couldn't even justified that we're doing this for a greater good. There's no call to do that particular thing in that case. At least have had like one of the veteran pilots, perhaps, say like, hey, there's still people in these buildings.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, let's try to be aware of it.
Something like that could add some dimension to these fights and to these characters, saying like, and establish that these are young pilots who are just came out of training. And said, no, it's for the most part these pilots seem to be doing just as well as experienced pilots.
Right, exactly. Which again, then why bring in these people who don't seem to be that good of a role model in Nate and Pentecost, when presumably there's still veteran pilots walking around out there for the first film. You could have had who knew what they were doing more. It's just a lot of like holes in the entire plot.
Yeah, and everything just feels so sloppily put together. And, I can only imagine what, like, the behind-the-scenes deal must have been like with this movie, where it's like maybe it was like so many like ideas being thrown about, and you never had like someone like Del Toro who had a clear vision, who wanted to put this all together in a coherent fashion. Instead, it's like, fuck it, let's just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Right, I think they wanted to get as many plot points in as they could, or maybe tropes, but it just didn't come together overly well. Yeah. I don't know what else to say.
Neither do I. So I think would now be an appropriate time to go. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Charlie Day as the villain, as Newt. I just don't think Charlie Day has it in him to make himself seem like a threatening villain. His performance as like evil Newt is almost laughable to an extent, and he never came off as threatening to me. And the fact that he never came out of this movie with being redeemed is very sad for me as someone who liked his character from the first movie.
That was a tough pill to swallow for a lot of fans, I think.
And maybe they wanted to have him redeem himself by the very end by the third movie, but it looks like we're not going to get that third movie.
No, which is a shame. Although I didn't care for the ending either, where like Jake makes a statement that they're going after.
We're gonna take
that just seems like a dumb idea.
We're gonna take the fight to them.
Like when Gypsy Danger was in there in the first film, it was like he didn't look like he could even walk. It just seemed like physics worked differently there. How are you going to take the fight to them?
Yeah.
And there, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess now would be time for final thoughts. So I'll let you go first.
Well, I thought this movie, I will say it's okay. I don't hate it as much as some people do. I do think that the action, as you know, I do like action in a film, is enough to at least make it worth a viewing. I can't necessarily say that it's a must see by any stretch of the imagination. So I think I would have to give it probably 2 out of 5 stars in my estimation.
Yeah. I will not say that it's a bad movie. It's not completely unwatchable. It's not like complete trash or anything like that. This is by no way like a Transformers movie. Maybe it's more like a Robot Jocks in a way, where it's like, again, good ideas, great effects, interesting premise, but just kind of sloppily executed, and the fights couldn't be to their fullest. But this was one of those movies where it's like I felt like I had to force myself to enjoy the movie, and that's never a good thing. The last time I ever felt that way was when I was watching Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, and ironically enough, both were giant robot movies that had, whose sequels were pretty decent for the most part and had potential to be improved upon. And here it's just all that potential has been squandered, all that potential for this series to soar to new heights as like the next Star Wars in terms of big new original franchises.
Right.
And already they stumbled right out of the gate with the sequel. I want to continue supporting the franchise, but this movie really put a damper on things. So like with you, there is some good to be seen here, such as Jake and Amara's characters, the little bit of world building we get here. Some of the ideas are neat. Some of the action scenes are admittedly really cool. The robot scenes, for some people, these may appeal to you more than they did for me. And so, yeah, I would give this 2 out of 5 simply just for the visuals alone and for the two characters that kind of sort of work for the most part. But other than that, it's just very sloppy, very disappointing, and overall kind of for me personally, like a soul-crushing experience.
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to what I felt about the Godzilla Monster Planet, where I really had high hopes, and then it just, for me, it didn't come to fruition, and I wanted so much more from it.
I already had low expectations going in due to all the reception, and even then, It's like, yeah, just isn't working for me.
Yeah. Oh, did you at least like the Gundam pop up in the movie? I forgot to ask. They show the Gundam statue.
Kind of. I was told that there's a Gundam reference by Chris Stuckman on YouTube. When I heard there was a Gundam reference, I thought that meant that they're gonna do a popular an iconic scene from Gundam, like maybe a character shoots his gun up into the air or something like that, or maybe a robot kicks another robot in the stomach. But no, it's just they threw it's the Unicorn Gundam statue. Okay. It's like, I was expecting, in terms of a Gundam reference, I was expecting something more than just, here's the statue, because Gundam is popular. It's and the thing is, it's so weird that you would choose the Gundam. Yeah, I get that Gundam is perhaps the most popular robot franchise ever, but stylistically, Gundam and Pacific Rim feels kind of dissociated feels so distant from each other in terms of their approaches to giant robots, because Pacific Rim has always been more in the style of super robots, whereas Gundam is more real robots. Gundam is more about the emotions, the hardships of war, what it does to a person. Meanwhile, super robots like Mazinger Z, was it Getter Robo, Kotetsu Jig, Gai King, Vanguard Ace. These are all giant robot shows where it's like, these are the bad guys. They're evil. They're aliens. They want to take over the world. And here's the heroic robots to save the day.
Right.
So it's just kind of weird. And I remember I seem to recall there used to be, I'm not sure if there still is, a life-size Gigantor or Tetsujin 28 statue. That would have been much more appropriate. But
yes.
I get it. As someone who did see the Gundam statue in real life, specifically the unicorn statue that you saw here, it was a little neat to see the Gundam statue there. It's weird that it's not in Odaiba, which is where the statue is right now. Instead, the location where the Gundam statue is completely different. But hey, it's the future. They moved the first Gundam statue several times, so maybe they moved it in that time. So it's just it's kind of like where it's like you're given this like, for me with the Gundam statue reference, it's like you just had this dinner, which was very disappointing, and then someone threw a cookie at you. It's like, okay, it's the cookie is nice, but it's barely anything to satisfy me after having this mediocre meal here.
However, for perhaps a future review, did Ready Player One give you that Gundam fix you were looking for?
Yes! Always! Yes, thankfully, Ready Player One was the breath of fresh air I needed after Pacific Rim Uprising, and hopefully you guys in the audience will look forward to my review when I would cover that film with both Enshohma and Brayton, hopefully in the near future. So... Those have been our thoughts for Pacific Rim Up Yours, as I like to call it nowadays. I hope that you've enjoyed this review of ours, and I understand there are people who are fans of this movie. You know what? That is fantastic. I wanted to enjoy this movie. Unfortunately, I couldn't. So if you could enjoy it in ways I couldn't, that is awesome. I wish I could be you. But unfortunately, these are just simply my own subjective feelings that I cannot change.
Yeah, I think if you go into it low enough expectations, it's just okay. Trying to salvage it. Hey, before we go, we need to plug. We talked about monsters combining or working together to fight something.
Oh yeah,
we have the new Kaiju versus Cancer shirt out, Destroy All Cancer, which it features 12 monsters with art beautifully done by our good friend Tyler Souls, who does the Durantis comic book.
And the
12 monsters.
and the upcoming Draco Azul comic book.
Oh, yes, in the upcoming Draco Azul comic book. And he did 12 monsters and mechs, all in the same. We tried to redo the classic VHS DVD cover art for Destroy All Monsters. So I'm sure you can put a picture up of this, right, Andres?
Absolutely. Yeah.
At the end of your, yeah. And you can follow that on Facebook. You can link to buy a shirt there, and we highly recommend that you do so. Again, all proceeds go to help out the children at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, kids fighting cancer. So, get an awesome shirt for a great cause.
Absolutely. And let's see, in terms of other announcements, you can be sure to check out our next review. I know we recorded this before, but due to scheduling issues, I'm probably going to have to put up that review after this one, which is our next film noir review for The Third Man. So that was another great classic that we went over, and so hopefully you enjoyed that. If you just so happen to enjoy film noir movies as much as you do kaiju movies like us. And let's see, other than that, you can also be sure to please follow the Kaiju vs. Cancer Facebook page. You can follow both of us on Instagram at Kaiju Noir and Matt Denian. You can follow the Primal Warrior Draco Azul Facebook page for all the latest information on my upcoming comic book, and you can be sure to follow Garayan who is an artist from Thailand whose comic I helped worked on in terms of getting the English version ready, which is the English version to his giant monster comic, Nagarayar, Kingdom of the Monsters. So you can follow Garayan through his Facebook page, Planet G. You can follow him on DeviantArt and Instagram at Garayan, which is GARAYANN. So yeah, you can check that out in terms of like other future kaiju products that I've been officially working on. So
yes,
yeah.
Oh, real quick for me, I just finished Operation Megalodon, which is the sequel to Operation Rock. If you want a much better story, I think, of people syncing with or linking with giant monsters, please check it out. It should be out in about 2 weeks from what Sever Press is telling me. So.
Excellent, man. Looking forward to your next literary how would you call it? Your next literary endeavor.
Yep.
Yes, always. So I have been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
And I've been Matthew Denian.
And until next time, everybody, take care.